Up until now, women have been largely neglected.
Dr. Jocelyn Fitzgerald is a urogynecologist, a surgeon, and a researcher dedicated to breaking the silence around issues like pelvic pain, UTIs, and everything in between.
I think a lot of people don't know what the pelvic floor is. All of these muscles that line the bony pelvis, that is your pelvic floor. Continue to talk about this. Normalize these conversations. Biggest reason that women have recurrent UTIs is being menopausal or being postmenopausal, having low estrogen. Unfortunately, women's health has not really been funded by our governmental institutions. Most men, they worry that they're violating your privacy or it's not their place to ask. They do have a lot of well-intentioned and meaningful questions.
Hi there, I'm Leah, and welcome to the House of Hormones podcast. Thank you so much for coming on today, Dr. Fitzgerald. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me. This is very exciting.
Obviously, I'm very familiar with a lot of your stuff on social media and all the advocacy that you do. For those women that maybe aren't familiar with some of the work that you do, tell us a little bit about yourself and your mission.
Yes. You know exactly why I'm on social media, because a lot of people don't know about urogynecology, which is what I am. I'm a specialist called a urogynecologist. The formal name in the United States is urogynecology and reconstructive pelvic surgery. So we are essentially, some people think of us as like female urologists or female pelvic floor surgeons. We also do non-surgical care of women's bladders, vaginal prolapse, incontinence, bowel health, pelvic pain, sexual health. That's kind of the comprehensive overview of what we do. I practice in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I spend a lot of my time in the digital and social space trying to educate women about what urogynecology is, why we exist, how we can help restore your life to what, it was always sort of meant to be. So thank you for having me.
And why are you so passionate about this specific topic then?
I became really passionate about this because I feel very strongly that obviously motherhood is a beautiful thing, being a parent is a beautiful thing, but medically, the amount of time and effort we put forth towards fertility, childbirth, like this actual like pretty small window of time that women are living their lives. I mean, let's say the average woman in the United States has 2 children. That's 2 to 5% of her whole life she's pregnant, but that's the majority of the healthcare that she receives. And then what do we do for women after that? The majority of women's financial, social success can and should come after they have children. We are not just put on this earth to have children, despite what some people like to think. And so, to really help women like reach their potential and not just say like, once you've had your babies, we're leaving you behind. We need a field of medicine that allows that to happen. Like not just to survive childbirth, but to like thrive in your postpartum lifetime. So urogynecology to me is not only like a medical practice, but it's a like social and political force that contradicts patriarchy, which like for up until now, women have been largely neglected in terms of what happens to their physical body as they move through the world as a result of the often trauma and complications that occur from childbirth. So that's why I'm very, very passionate about it, because most people don't know it exists. And I say that if we were more open and admitted what, someone's postpartum life really looks like, we would all know what urogynecologists.
I'm smiling. And obviously I'm not smiling because of what you've just said. I'm smiling with excitement about the fact that there does seem to be movement on the topic. So women's health, the conversation is starting to flow.
Yes.
But obviously women's bodies change so much after childbirth.
So much.
And your body can be so different. But why aren't we talking about this more?
Because we have, and I'm speaking mostly for like American culture, but I know that like Western culture in general does this. We have this idea, this totally unrealistic idea that if you're a woman of a certain I don't know, stature or quality or caliber, something totally that's been made up by men, that you should have your children and emerge unscathed. You should be just as thin, just as productive, just as beautiful as you ever were, just as well rested. You're supposed to, be a mom who acts like she doesn't have a job, and have a job where you act like you're not a mother, and your body is not supposed to be any different. Otherwise, you've let yourself go, which is such an unhinged and extreme thing to think. There's no bigger shift in someone's physicality than the literal physical, I'll call it a miracle, but like the biologic process of expanding your body to accommodate a life, another person, and then to retreat back. I mean, the biologic complexity of that is so insane. And for so long, I think people are just like, oh, it's just like a natural thing and beautiful thing that happens to women. But like scientifically, biologically, and mechanically, it is a process unlike any other in human health. So there's actually a lot to learn about how all of biology works by studying how women's bodies change. It's astounding when you get down to what little we do know.
It's so interesting you say that. We've actually just launched a petition for the government to provide more funding for research into women's bodies. And I think you just touched on that there. And it's so interesting that given that women have cycles and can give birth to another human, like, and this is not to insult men, but our bodies are obviously way more interesting. If I was a scientist, but if I was a scientist way back when, I would have been like, forget men's bodies. I want to study this one, right?
And that did happen.
Would want to study them more.
Absolutely. There's some really interesting stories in like the history of medicine that was very much the case. And then a lot of that research was erased over the years, over like centuries. There was a lot of research done in women's health, some of which was discovered by women, and then their like textbooks were burned. And we've had to like start over so many times. It still happens. Wow. Yeah, there's actually a lot to be learned about men's health from studying women's health. I mean, obviously all people come from women, so that's the first thing, is studying like fetology does that. But I also know orthopedic surgeons who study like pelvic trauma. Like literally, if you get in a car accident and you have a pelvic fracture, they are trying to figure out like how we can learn about repairing pelvic fractures from what women's bodies go through, expanding their pelvic bones apart to prepare for childbirth. So there are things we can learn about men's health too that people don't always think about.
I've seen some recent studies which are really interesting about the blood from a woman's cycle.
Yes.
And that research, have you read much about that? What are your thoughts on that?
I've read a little bit about it. I am not surprised at all that, there are going to be genetic tags and biomarkers that might have some sort of diagnostic potential in menstrual blood. I mean, how could it not? Like every other bodily fluid is part of some lab test or another. Why would menstrual blood be any different? And it's such a dynamic, like biological substance. It's hormonally responsive. It responds to other stresses in our bodies. That's like very endocrinologically rich. So it's just that no one's ever asked that question before.
Yeah, which kind of feels crazy, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, there were no women scientists. I mean, we're living in like the first generations of women having any real money to pursue their research. And of course, they're asking these questions. So people like forget that Title IX happened in the 70s. So we're not that far out. We're 50 years out from women being able to go to school and study science in any type of real numbers.
It must feel like a really exciting time then in your profession with everything that's going on.
Yeah.
You touched on the fact of, women giving birth and kind of how crazy the whole process is and how much of an effect it has on your body.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to point out that this morning I actually had a really innocent conversation. Maybe it was because I knew I was speaking to you today, but with my mother-in-law, and we were talking about how crazy it is to give birth and then to leave the hospital that day, or to leave the hospital the next day. So women just, off you go, pack your bag. Oh, and here's your baby.
Here's your baby.
Not only do you need to get over what's just happened, but also here's a human. Can you look after that forever now?
Right. It's crazy. It's even crazier if you've had a C-section. But it is true. Like, I always find that very stunning. I mean, in the United States, people tend to stay like 1 or 2 nights, but I know that in the UK, I mean, there's midwives, right, that go to the house and check up on women afterwards, so they often go home the same day. I always think of the pictures of Kate Middleton, like the day she gave birth, out on the steps of the hospital, like holding her baby. I'm just like, oh my God, this is insane. Like, I know what just happened to her pelvis, and now we've gotten her hair done and put her in a dress. And if I were her, I mean, she's built different, obviously, but I would have been like, oh my God, my body just went through,
What should we be saying to women then? Because obviously, you're exactly right. That's the message that's being portrayed to women. Yeah. So, get your stuff together and put a brave face on and out you go. And I remember when I had my first child and probably my second child, you've got loads of friends and family who are obviously very excited to see the baby, but you get up and you get dressed and to put it in a way for women to understand of like what's actually happened to their body. I mean, how can we reframe this for them to talk about self-care and what they should be doing, what that should look like?
I mean, everyone is so different. I mean, I definitely, I have friends and patients that have experienced the full spectrum of symptoms afterwards. Some people, they do have an easy labor and they feel sore, but otherwise functional. They're up and about. Like, they want to go walk and do things that they feel better. But then there's other people who have had a really severe laceration or a tear. They're in a tremendous amount of pain. They have stitches. They aren't able to hold their bladder or their bowels yet. They really feel like quite torn apart. And if that's the case, nobody knows what's going on or happened with your delivery more than you and your doctor. I would say women should not be ashamed to say, like, I had a very challenging birth. I had some birth trauma. I had a tear. I am in pain. I am not ready. I'm in diapers. Not ready for certain visitors. I actually had a friend who texted me last week and said that her sister had just had a baby. She had preeclampsia. She had a C-section. I mean, it was really challenging for her. My friend is also a physician. And that their father told her to like get on with it, that it was time to let visitors come and see this baby. And my friend was enraged. She herself is a physician. She's like, how would you handle this? I'm so mad at my dad. And I said, like, on one hand, tell him the truth. And the other hand, like, he really may just not know. Men in particular don't know. Women don't even know. It's a secret we keep from each other because everyone wants to give the illusion, I think, that childbirth was not difficult for them, because if it was difficult for them, then what's wrong with them? When in fact, that is the majority of patients, because the proof is in the numbers that 50% of women will see a urogynecologist for a pelvic floor disorder in the US in their lifetime. We do the number 1 surgery on women over the age of 65, I believe it is. So sometimes it's a long way out, but childbirth is deeply affecting millions of people, and no one really wants to talk about it. They just want to quietly take care of it or pretend that they're not suffering because their friends aren't suffering, so something must be wrong with them. And that's just not true. We're all keeping secrets from each other.
Has your body ever done something weird or out of the norm? You've already went to the doctor, you've had your blood test, but you're still thinking, is this normal? Am I the only one that's dealing with this? Sometimes you just need to hear it from someone who actually gets it. And that's literally why we've created the House of Hormones Forum. Think your girls' group chat, but with an upgrade. The House of Hormones Forum is a safe space with zero judgment and a strong community of women who really get what you're going through, because they're going through it too. We're talking PMS, mood swings, cycle changes, cravings, all of it. And the best part is you've got real support with the House of Hormones Forum. So whether you just want to vent or you've come to ask questions, come and join us. It's given science meets sisterhood. So come and join the conversation at the House of Hormones Forum. We've saved you a seat. www.thehouseofhormones.com and just click forum. I'm so pleased you touched on men there as well, because it's really important to us at the House of Hormones to bring men into the conversation.
Yeah.
And we're always trying to find ways to do that and not scare them.
Yeah.
but
maybe they need to be scared. I don't know.
Well,
why are we so concerned with protecting men?
This is so true. Well, I mean, not scare them as in scare them off where they can't then consume the information.
Sure.
So where you want to engage them, ways to make it kind of easy for them to understand. And it's difficult, but what I found, and I'm not sure how you think about this, but what I found is they're actually really open to talking about it when you do engage them in conversation, or they do want to listen and they do have a lot of questions that are unanswered. They just don't feel validated in asking those questions.
Yes, I would agree. I think that they almost think it's, this is most men, are just, they worry that they're violating your privacy or it's not their place to ask. But when you give them the space to discuss, what is really going on, they do have a lot of well-intentioned and meaningful questions. Many of them wanting to know how they can support their wife, or they wish they had known that this was happening and that she was, suffering in silence and hiding her pads. And
so what signs should women look for, whether it's prolapse, postpartum incontinence, painful intercourse? What should women be looking out for?
All of the things you just said. Pelvic floor health is really a field of medicine that is driven by how burdensome the symptom is to the patient. So if it doesn't bother you, it doesn't bother us. But if you are bothered by leakage, pain with intercourse, you're kind of now, working your day mentally around where the bathrooms might be. You're kind of living in fear of having an accident. You don't want to do certain activities or exercises. You wish you could do them, but you're not. You no longer do jumping jacks or play certain games with your children. Think about, whether or not that could be improved. You shouldn't be having your whole life revolving around whether or not you can hold your bowels or your bladder. We would love to help you with that. We don't want you to have to miss out on things or experiences because your mind space is taken up with that type of worry. I would say listen to how burdensome the problem is and then decide if it's something you want to have treated. So anything and everything. If you're not sure, you could obviously see your general gynecologist. I do think there's a reasonable number of resources online. If you search the symptoms that you have, hopefully it would direct you to a urogynecologist. But we're happy to see you early and often. The treatments work better if we see you sooner. So don't just feel like you have to suffer until you can't take it before you come in.
And what can women do to advocate for themselves? So just overall, is there something that women should be doing daily or weekly to help themselves?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say there's anything necessarily like daily or weekly to be done, but I would say that we know the majority of primary care family doctors, community doctors, even general gynecologists are probably not going to ask you about these symptoms. Unfortunately, they should be, but a lot of them maybe don't know of a urogynecologist or don't have a relationship with one or don't know very much about the success rates of some of the treatments. And so you unfortunately need to be empowered to mention it to them, to say, especially if you need a referral, I'm experiencing this. I'm wondering if you can refer me to somebody who specializes in this condition, and go from there.
And just list a couple of examples of what that could be.
Absolutely.
So for people listening, like, I'm experiencing what types of things and how can they phrase that? Because we hear so often that women just don't feel listened to by their doctors, and we are trying to give them the tools and literally a script of say this.
Yes. So I would say any feeling of heaviness or a bulge in the vagina, like something has come down or is bulging out of the vagina, that was a symptom of prolapse. Any urinary leakage, like bladder accidents, bowel accidents, pain with intercourse, pain with urination, really pain with bowel movements too, like any type of pain really between like your belly button and your knees, we will see you for. Vaginal dryness, recurrent urinary tract infections. And I would say specifically, I have this problem. Is this something you feel you can treat? And if not, would you refer me to a urogynecologist? I would just say that and go from there.
We get asked a lot about UTIs, and about 90% of women that we speak to just say the only thing that they're offered is an antibiotic.
Yeah. That is sad. There's nothing wrong with treating, a one-off UTI with antibiotics. I mean, that is perfectly acceptable to do. But if you are having repeated urinary tract infections, in fact, the threshold we have is pretty low. It's 2 in 6 months or 3 in a year. That is considered to be, quote, recurrent urinary tract infections. That really, deserves some sort of investigation. So I would say be empowered to see a urogynecologist for that problem. We are going to ask a lot more questions. We're going to ask about your sexual activity. We're going to ask about your age, your menopausal status, other risk factors you might have, like kidney stones. We're going to look for prolapse. We're going to look for any cysts in the area that might be retaining urine. We're going to make sure your bladder is emptying well. We're going to ask you more questions about if you've had, like what symptoms you have compared with what lab studies you have. Like, have you actually been tested for bacteria, or is your GP just giving you antibiotics? Could this be something else? Could it be a bladder pain syndrome? Could it be endometriosis? Could it be a tight pelvic floor? We're going to figure out if these things are actually UTIs, because so many patients think that if they just have difficulty with urination, UTI is the one diagnosis they can think of that might be replicating what they feel. And then we do this much more thorough evaluation to figure out if truly these are recurrent bacterial urinary infections, and then how do we prevent those? And we have much better tools to prevent UTIs than just throwing antibiotics at patients.
One of the things that I hear a lot as well is how much a UTI actually affects people's lives, especially when they're recurrent. So not even on the actual physical symptoms, but their mental health.
Yes.
What's the type of what's the worst case you've seen of this?
Of women who just have like really just stubborn UTIs. I guess I'll pat myself on the shoulder and say that most patients I treat, their UTIs get better. I would say 90 to 95% of them. The biggest reason that women have recurrent UTIs is being menopausal or being postmenopausal, having low estrogen, because estrogen is really part of the engine that keeps the vaginal good, bad bacterial balance, pH balance correct. So we can fix that really easily. I see so many women who come in after menopause getting UTI after UTI after UTI. We cure them with vaginal estrogen cream. It's a very easy fix. It's part of what we call genitourinary syndrome of menopause. I have seen some patients who are really very elderly. Their bladder probably doesn't empty very well anymore. They've had genitourinary syndrome of menopause that's gone untreated without vaginal estrogen for decades. At that point, my hypothesis is that their bladder is colonized with bacteria that we just aren't really able to get rid of. So I've seen some really, really resistant cases in that way, but I've seen very few patients I haven't been able to get rid of their true UTIs with medication and a full evaluation. To your point about mental health, when they come to me, they are often in extraordinary distress. Their life is revolving around this. They're afraid to go on vacation. They'll only go on vacation if they have some backup antibiotics or some other means of treating their urinary pain, and their life is really revolved around this stress. It's affected their relationships because they feel that every time they have intercourse or intimacy, they get symptoms, so they avoid that with their partner, and it kind of deteriorates their relationship. I can just tell when patients come in, like, not only are they obviously distressed, but I think this makes me really sad that they have not been believed by other doctors, or maybe like their story is not being received, and they have pressured speech. Like, these women are just talking as fast as they can because I can tell they really want me to hear what they have to say. And I do feel badly. I let them go on, but typically I know what's wrong with them right away. And then they don't have to tell me that whole story, but every other doctor they've seen, they have to tell this whole story in order to have it feel serious.
Yeah. Yeah, I think every woman knows what a UTI feels like, and so we all feel so bad for those people that are having recurrent. You touched a little bit on menopause, and I just wanted to ask, what role do hormones play in pelvic health? So how can hormonal changes like perimenopause, menopause, or birth control impact the bladder and vaginal function?
Yeah, they play a very large role. We know that the bladder and the pelvic floor tissues and the vaginal tissues are very sensitive to estrogen. They have a tremendous number of estrogen receptors and estrogen-driven, like, biologic pathways. The one that is probably best understood is this link between the vaginal microbiome. And when I say that, I mean the balance of good bacteria and the pH. And when I say pH, that's like the acidity of the vagina. That is produced by good bacteria. So it's this really fine balance. And estrogen is very much integral to keeping the vagina at those healthy levels that keep things like E. coli and other UTI creating bacteria out of the bladder. So that is probably like the best studied and understood mechanism. But we also know, and clinically I know this to be true because I see patients, that you can really have some changes in your estrogen sort of levels and fluctuation in the way estrogen is actually bound in your bloodstream as a result of being on suppressive hormones like continuous birth control pills, or even some patients, it's rare, some people who have like a Nexplanon or IUD. Every woman is sort of different in terms of whether or not they ovulate on those medications. And so they're wonderful medications. I mean, like, being pregnant is a risk factor for UTI. So I want women very much to stay on their contraception. But I will say that I do see a lot of patients who have been on birth control pills for a very, very long time, and they have some pH and microbiome changes that sort of look similar to a postmenopausal patient. And I am typically able to get rid of those UTIs with vaginal estrogen also. That is an emerging field of research. That's something that I don't know a ton of doctors that do it. I know a lot of urogynecologists do it. Like, we all clinically see it working, but the research hasn't probably been done as much as it needs to be. But there's some other medications besides estrogen that we use. But to answer your question, hormones play a very big role.
So pelvic floor, is this the biggest topic that you get asked about?
I do get asked about the pelvic floor a lot. I think a lot of people don't know what the pelvic floor is. And so actually, you know, since we're here and we have video, I like bought this model. So in case I ever do video and explain, then people can actually see. So the pelvic floor, this is a female pelvis. All of these muscles that line the bony pelvis, that is your pelvic floor. And you can see that, like, all of these muscles attach to, like, the bones of your hips and, like, your sit bones. And then there's, like, this inner lining of muscle where I'll show you in a minute, but basically there's 3 holes in your pelvic floor. This is basics, but your urethra, the vagina, and the rectum, obviously, like, the tubes that carry urine, babies, and bowel movements move through this bowl of muscle. And so these muscles, and there's nerves as well that aren't really shown in the model. Those nerves come out of your spine literally right here, and they control all those functions. Like, a lot of them are not voluntary. I mean, like, thank God, all of us don't have to walk around all day thinking about consciously making sure we're not leaking urine. And so when people ask me about the pelvic floor, that is how I have to explain it. It's very hard to explain without a visual, but it is this bowl of muscle that all the nerves and all the organs run through between your hips and your legs. So a very integral role in keeping you continent until it is socially appropriate to go to the bathroom.
So, you've got a doctor's appointment coming up, and you're just trying to figure out what the hell is going on with your body. You need our free symptom tracker. It's like the receipts folder for your hormones. You can track the bloat, the mood swings, the brain fog, the mystery acne, and then roll it all into your next appointment like a hormonal pro. No more being brushed off or told it's all in your head. You've got the data. Download it for free today from our website and start advocating for yourself. www.thehouseofhormones.com and head to our free download section. And what can women do themselves at home for their pelvic floor? Do you believe in the exercises that people talk about a lot?
Yeah, I do actually. I do believe in them. I do think there is a lot of misinformation about when you should be doing exercises and for what symptom. I think a lot of people think that for anything you feel going on in your pelvic floor, that you should be doing Kegels or squeezing your pelvic floor muscles. And I have seen patients overdo it or overcorrect, or they're having difficulty holding their urine. And as it turns out, the reason they're having difficulty holding their urine isn't because their pelvic floor muscles are too loose or weak, but it's actually because they're too tight and they're in spasm. And that is best diagnosed with a pelvic exam and working with a pelvic floor physical therapist. So, of course, if you've just had a baby and you have some small leaks with coughing, laughing, sneezing, that's called stress incontinence, and you want to try out some Kegels at home and you get better, by all means. But it really, we haven't talked much yet about pelvic floor therapy and where they come in. They are therapists, physical therapists that specialize in specifically these muscles and their attachments to these bones. It's no different from if you have somebody helping you with your knee or your shoulder. They're muscles that are attached to bones and ligaments that control certain functions. They work on these muscles specifically, and they're extremely skilled, and they can help you learn the anatomy, learn how to engage your pelvic floor, learn how to both squeeze and relax so that you kind of get the movements back.
There's quite a lot of products coming on the market at the moment around this area, so around pelvic floor health. I'm sure you've seen some that are complete rubbish. I'm sure you've seen some that maybe could work. What's your take on what all the different products coming onto the market?
Yeah, there are several pelvic floor trainers. They're basically, I mean, some of them are really clever, like silicone inserts that have a Bluetooth capacity to them, and you can use them through an app on your phone. They can guide you through a pelvic floor almost workout routine. And there's been some research that shows, like the example I gave before, specifically stress urinary incontinence, leakage with coughing, laughing, sneezing, most often happens after childbirth, that those devices can be really useful. But, you know, there are, I think, some patients who use them and the diagnosis isn't really there. They haven't quite made the right diagnosis, or maybe they do have some pelvic floor spasm. So they're going to help a lot of people, but they're not going to help everyone. I do think they're a really good tool. Pelvic floor therapists are in very high demand. Sometimes you have to wait a long time to get an appointment with them. Some women live in rural areas where they're not near a specialist like that. And so this can really be a good extender for their services. So yeah, some of them are really good. There's others that I think are unproven. I've gotten some sent. I get sent all sorts of things to look at by companies. Like there are these things, these shorts that have like electrical stimulation that are meant to like, they're like little biker shorts that have like a almost like a TENS unit in them, and they are to stimulate your pelvic floor muscles. they're very expensive. I haven't really seen a lot of, success stories from that. There's like chairs that people sit in at certain like medi spas. There's something called an Emsella chair. On a case by case basis, there are women who might say those things help them, like this electrical sort of almost like current that helps with the muscle strengthening. It's also very expensive and prohibitive for a lot of people. I don't know how much it doesn't really have a lot of research, so it's any better than physical therapy. So yeah, I mean, it's a tough area to navigate with your wallet for sure.
What's the biggest myth that drives you crazy?
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's so difficult. Probably that the treatments we have don't work. I have had a lot of patients who were told by their GPs or their PCPs that, not, the things we do are not helpful. And the things we do are not perfect, but it doesn't mean they're not helpful. Like, they do work a lot of the time. And
what type of treatment are you referring to?
I see it a lot for like prolapse surgery, for example. People say like, oh, those surgeries don't work. Like they fail. And then these patients come into me when their prolapse is so bad that it won't stay in their body anymore. And they're like, oh, I like wanted to see you years ago, but my GP said the surgeries you do don't work. I'm like, that is not true. Like, that is not true. They do work. Nothing in medicine is perfect. There's no facelift that is going to keep your face frozen for the rest of your life. There's no hip replacement that is going to last for 30 years. Same thing, like you're still going to be using your body parts every single day, but the success rates of our surgeries are the same as any other reconstructive surgery that you would have done on any other part of your body. So I do think it's a big misconception that what we do doesn't work or it doesn't last or it's not worth doing because it's elective. And I get really mad about that.
Do you think there's a bit of stigma around these types of operations and procedures?
I do. And I think there is a very pervasive attitude, and these are not malintentioned people. Other doctors are not trying to like withhold, I think, treatment for women, but I do think there's this idea that these things are not a big deal and it's just part of being a woman and everyone experiences it. You kind of just have to live with it. That makes me very upset because we're not giving that same messaging to men. You just live with this pain, or this is just part of having, men don't have babies, but like this is just part of being a man. Just part of being a man is being in pain or not being able to hold your bladder. I mean, that would just never happen.
I think a lot of these procedures linked to vanity as well, as opposed to being linked with better health?
That's a very interesting question. I haven't really received any type of message that it's vanity per se, although yeah, maybe I guess if women don't want to wear pads, or what they're saying is like, I just want to exercise and I leak when I exercise.
The reason I ask is because I think sometimes there's a little bit of confusion over, the types of procedures that you would do for women's health, and then maybe other procedures that can be done, like the designer vagina, and like the more aesthetic.
Yes.
And I think have those worlds overlapped, and there's a bit of confusion there, and so people are too scared, or from the vanity perspective, are people too embarrassed to talk about their certain symptoms? Like you said, people like to pretend they went through childbirth in a really simple way, and everything's fine, and people want to keep up appearances.
Yes. Okay. So in that way, yes, there is some overlap. There's also some confusion about what it is exactly that we do. I think there are definitely patients out there and other doctors who think when they hear that we're reconstructive, like vaginal surgeons, that what we do is mostly like labiaplasties or vaginal rejuvenation, whatever that means. And that, is not true. Like we are trained in like full pelvic floor reconstruction, but we do and can do those things. And that kind of gets more into like the body image, sexual health piece of what we do. I think a lot of that has to do with women's sexual confidence. They're like, I feel like usually they say it in the context of a partner. Like, I don't like how my labia looks, or I don't like how, like, the way my vagina feels, or I think feels to my partner after I've had gone through childbirth. Like, I would like to talk to you about those sensations. So there is a piece of that. I'd say that's the minority of the patients that I see, but I do know that they exist. And I do have like I really validate those patients. I'm like, tell me what, like, how this would make your life better, not how would it make like your husband or boyfriend's life better. And we kind of go from there. That's very much a conversation. But I agree that, yeah, there is some confusion about who sort of owns cosmetic gynecology.
I really love your stuff on social media. I love your posts and I love what you're doing. In what ways do you see social media impacting the field of medicine and particularly in women's health?
I think it's only been a good thing. Social media is a double-edged sword for reasons we all know. It gives everyone a platform if they want one. So good messaging and bad messaging suddenly becomes more accessible, especially if it's something that was in the fringes. And there's a lot of things that I think should stay in the fringes, but I don't think that women's health is one of them. So in that sense, I think it has brought women's health and the things that are making it smaller or keeping it from thriving out of the shadows. Particularly, I talk a lot about the economic drivers and like the money that goes into this. It's a very exciting time because I kind of made mention of this earlier. This is like the first generation we've really had enough female scientists to make a difference in the landscape of what research is getting done. But this is also in many ways the first generation of women in the Western world who have had financial independence. And I think that that is so important to talk about because as women with financial independence like age and go through perimenopause and have their babies and then realize that their financial independence is linked to their pelvic floor, they do not want to just suffer at home in the ways their mothers and grandmothers did. They have things to do. They have places to be. They have money to make. They have communities to organize, and they can't be slowed down by bladder leaks. So in that way, social media has taken the lid and the secrecy off of that, and it's given women a community where they can bond and to just make these things not secretive. They're just facts of life, and there's specialists that deal with it, and we're here to support you. So, I mean, I love it. I wish more women's health providers were on social media. That it's growing all the time, but doctors are busy, so I understand that there's a lot of barriers to putting yourself out there.
Have you been feeling like your hormones are running the show? Been there? Same. Our ebook is your no BS glow up guide to hormonal health. We're talking facts, expert advice, and real life hacks, all in one gorgeously written download. So whether you're dealing with PMS, perimenopause, or you're just tired of Googling what the hell is wrong with me, grab your copy now at www.thehouseofhormones.com, and we've tagged it below. We've got your back. How do you envision the future of women's health and the growth?
Well, I mean, I do think it's bright. That's like a whole other podcast, but the investment that's being made in women's health right now, it was literally a post this morning from Women's Health Access Matters, which is a very large economically driven group around women's health research, that these numbers are getting into the billions of dollars at this point. That is huge. Unfortunately, women's health historically has not really been funded by our governmental institutions, and public institutions like truly have failed to invest in women's health. In the United States, there was a report that came out within the last few months that showed the number was only, we thought, around 10% of the National Institutes of Health budget being spent on women's health. Turns out the true number is 7%, and almost that entire 7% is spent on maternal health as it relates to like the immediate pregnancy period, not maternal health like when the woman is 40, 50, 60, 70. So we weren't really seeing money anyway. So even though the shifts in our government are pretty profound at the moment, ironically, it probably isn't affecting women's health research funding that much because we were never getting that money to begin with. And so the groundswell of female-driven wealth and interest in this space continues to move forward because we were already doing that. So it's kind of like a silver lining, I suppose, that we were already like having a groundswell of resources going towards this. So I think the future is actually bright, despite the rest of the scientific community being, I think, in a real panic at the moment.
Yeah, same for sure. I'm optimistic, and I think it's actually a really exciting time. But obviously, that's talking about the future, and we're in the right now. So,
Yeah.
what advice would you give to women? Because obviously, we're not there yet, are we? And the help isn't just readily accessible to people.
No.
So, for women that are experiencing chronic pelvic pain, or women that are seeking effective treatment for what's going on, or they maybe were too shy to ask about whether this was a problem that can be helped, what would you advise them to do?
I think, I mean, it sounds so grassroots to say this, but like continue to talk about this every day in small ways to your friends, to your family, men, women, everyone, to your doctors, to people who you don't even think might be involved in this space. I think it's important for us as a society to normalize these conversations, and nothing seems to change public and private sentiment like collective outrage, I guess, or discontent. And so talking about it, I commend you so much for having a podcast on this topic. This is by no means a saturated space. Continue to talk, like write, produce in your business, in your art. Like you don't have to be in medicine to have this conversation, and just have it be something that comes up over and over and over again, like eternal vigilance, I guess. But yeah, just don't let these conversations die. Keep them going.
And it feels frustrating sometimes to keep saying advocate for yourself, because women don't always know exactly what that means. But right. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Just continue the conversation and right. Speak up. And obviously, Dr. Fitzgerald, you've given us some really great tips of how we can actually word what we need to say, yes. Or what to ask for. Is there any specific test that somebody suffering from UTIs, because we've talked a lot about that they should ask their doctor for? Yeah. Is there anything, a last advice?
That is a complicated question, but I would say the very basic thing is, do you think what I'm having are urinary tract infections? I want a urine culture, and I want to keep close track of those results. And if I'm not improving on antibiotics, or I continue to have symptoms, what I want is a referral to a urogynecologist or a specialist, and just say that out front. But I'm concerned something is being missed. This is affecting my life, and I would like a referral to talk to someone else about it. And I think that you will learn so much about your doctor in how they react to that. Because if a patient said that to me, I am so happy to involve other colleagues in the care of a patient that I cannot figure out what's going on with them. That would never offend me. I would be more than happy. And so I think if a physician gives you some sort of disapproval, that might be a good sign that you need a new GP or whoever you're talking to, because no doctor should ever respond with offense when you're asking for another opinion.
I absolutely love that advice. I love that advice. I love women should be able to say that to a doctor. Yeah. Like, can we get a second opinion? Because I'm just not sure about this. And we maybe need to start spreading that message a bit more, because that's actually a really normal thing.
Yeah, it's really normal. I've said it to doctors. I'm like, I respect your training so much, and I know that you have helped me as much as you possibly can. Do you think there's someone else I could ask about this? Because this is affecting my life, and I feel like something is being missed.
Wow.
So
I absolutely love that. That's honestly, that's the best advice I've heard in a very long time. That's so helpful. I really think that's going to help so many women. Dr. Fitzgerald, thank you so much for coming on the House of Hormones podcast today. We are thrilled to have you. I hope our listeners have taken something from this. If anybody's struggling, I really hope they'll follow you on Instagram and watch your content, because it really will provide some great education for them and some amazing advice. Thank you so much for everything that you do to advocate for women.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'd say the same to you as well for everything you're doing.
If you enjoyed this episode today, don't forget to like and subscribe to the House of Hormones podcast. Your support really does help us reach more people and spread the word about women's health. If you want to stay connected, follow us on our social media. And here's something really important. We're on a mission to secure more funding for women's health initiatives. Sign our government petition today and help us amplify our voices for better healthcare resources and support. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you for being part of our journey. We can't wait to see you in the next episode.